Hail to Thor, hammer wielder, lightning rider. Hail to he who brings us strength and courage on the lonely roads of life. May you inspire us to be courageous, to be brave, to be strong. May we think of you every time the thunder rolls or lightning flashes across the stormy sky. May we smile at a storm time, for we know you are with us, Thor. When red skies smile, let us know it is your red beard, blown by the winds. Hail to you, Thor, smasher of giants. Hail to you, Thor, strongest of gods, and may you forever protect us. Hello, my name is Jacob, and I am a Norse Pagan, and that beginning came from the God's Own County, a book of heathen prayers, so a lot of really good prayers in this book. But welcome to the third and final episode of Thor's Week, where we're going to talk about the actual practice of venerating and honoring Thor as a god. So we've moved aside from research, we've broken down the Marvel misconceptions of Thor, and here we are to talk about how do you actually honor him as a Norse pagan living in this modern age. So reading from a book of poems like that, or writing your own, is a really good start. Now, that one was very thunder heavy, but there's also a lot of really good poems in there about how he's the protector of Midgard, about how he, is an honorable son, an honorable father, and things like that, and slaying Jormungandr, and all that good stuff. But I do want to go ahead and talk about the thunder aspect of him right away, because that is something that up to this point on the channel, really all you've actually seen me talk about Thor. And that is something that personally I wanted to, do differently for this video series and this week, was to talk about Thor without the thunder, to talk about him without, needing a thunderstorm directly to mention him. I mean, having a thunderstorm is great. I mean, I think there's literally a thunderstorm this week on Thursday. So what a perfect day to venerate Thor. I mean, you're definitely going to have a Thor experience when you run out into a thunderstorm and pour out a beer and things like that. But also I think the next level of honoring and venerating Thor is really coming into your house and setting up a little spot for him like I have here on my altar, and venerating his aspects of fatherhood, of being a good son, of being a god of the hearth, being a god of the people. So really my only experience coming into this was running out into those thunderstorms. I think I've done 3 Thor videos where I've actually run out into thunderstorms and given offerings to him. We also gave to Thor as a group offering at Midsummer last year. Now again, this involved thunderstorms, but let me tell you, it was an amazing, this is definitely one of the most amazing Thor experiences I've ever had, is we were on this house on this hill and we could see a storm in the distance. We could see it coming, like the dark clouds, and so what we did is we went out there with our drums and we were just playing the drums and just shouting to Thor, asking him to come, asking him to give us his rain, mostly because it was so hot that day that, rain would have been awesome. And we sat by the only oak tree at that house, or the only ones that we could find near the house, and we played our drums. We felt the rain begin to pelt us, and then the first roar of thunder happened. We all poured out our drinks for him. We walked by the house, and then we were we were given just wave after wave of thunderstorm. I think there was 4 waves where it would come, it would rain, it would thunder, we would all bang the drums and sing, and then it would be sunny again and hot again. But then sure enough, another wave came, and that was probably one of the most amazing Thor experiences. And being a part of community, and venerating Thor was awesome, but you don't get that all the time. You're not always going to have a storm. So really that's what I want to focus on in this video, is how to honor Thor without storms, without thunder. So going into basics of offerings, I have, how to give offerings videos, and have given many offerings, but things like that poem I just read, I believe are a really great way to start off an offering or a bloat, however you want to call it, really just a time with a deity. Sitting here talking about their stories, talking about what we know about them, building them up, welcoming them into your home, having a spot for Thor. It may just be a corner of my altar, but it's still his spot. After talking to the deity, after talking to, Thor, building him up, welcoming him into your home, I light candles for no other reason than the fact that it just looks good. You could say, yes, it sets the mood, it gets me in the right mindset, it wakens the altar up, but also, maybe that is what it is. Maybe it is just, it sets the mood for me, it gets me in that mindset if you're doing rituals right now, you're doing an offering. You know, and it brings life to the altar, and it's not really, you know, fully active without the candles, but I mean, mostly it just looks really good. Yeah, it gets me in that mindset. Offerings to him, it can be quite simply a beer. Now, if you aren't able to get beer because of just age restrictions, or you just can't possibly get it, I do recommend, you know, fresh drinks. Like, don't give Thor like a Mountain Dew or anything super processed like that. Black coffee is something I've heard of people giving as well, but also things like fresh cider would also work. But the other thing I have here is a goblet with a ram, or yeah, I guess a ram on it. And I thought this was a great vessel to pour the drink in for, and not to mention it just looks like a very Thor drinking vessel. So this is actually what I will pour the offering into. So yeah, and Founder's Breakfast Stout, so very dark beer. I like giving Thor dark beer. Again, you can probably give him any beer or mead possible, but I really like dark beer for some reason. It always seems to get a good response. All right, so I'm gonna just do a small little offering to Thor, record it for you so that you can see it. Mighty Thor, protector of the hearth, god of the people, god of strength, but also fatherhood, being a good son, being in a good family, of living with honor, living with purpose. I wish to give you a gift today, a dark beer, to thank you for the strength you've shown me, for the strength you have yet to show me, and for the protection of my home, of my family, and hopefully for the continued protection of all of us that walk the old path. Thor, thank you. Skål. Hail Thor. So throughout this video, I actually want to share stories from the community of people that have had Thor experiences or just want to share their story with you. So I have a few stories I want to read, so in between this video, I'll just read a few of these stories. So, to begin, my wife and I were searching for a house to move into, one with land and a place for a workshop and a garden. The housing market was moving really fast, and there were some decent options that met our needs that we missed. It had been unusually rainy whenever we went to look at a house, as we live in a drier climate and have been alerted of some major leaks in some houses we were able to avoid. So we went to another house out in the country, a ways away from where we live. It's an old by American standard, but my wife and I loved it. It felt like a place we wanted. While we're inside, it begins to rain. We find a leak in the garage, and we aren't sure about it, but still have a good feeling about this place. We finish our tour and decide to go home. It's quite the drive back, and we discuss whether or not we want to make an offer on the home, as it checks everything off our list, and the smell of rain always puts us in a good mood. As we talk, the rain gets harder and harder, lightning and thunder start, and we stop at the last stoplight before reaching our destination. I was disenfranchised with my current religious beliefs, but still instinctively wanted to reach out to the heavens for an answer. I say to my wife something to the effect of, "If only we had a sign, that's what would make this house just right." And just then, lightning flashed behind a cloud right in front of us, lighting up the sky and the mountains behind it. And there in the sky, backlit by the lightning, was a giant thumbs up. My wife and I laughed jokingly and said, "Well, there you go. Thor approves of this message." We sat in silence for a minute before we both decided that we should actually make an offer on the house. We ended up winning the bid and buying the place. It definitely meant something to us, and although I'm not sure if the Norse path is the one we're on specifically, it did definitely lead us to being more open-minded and where we are now, which is happier than we have been in a long time. So quite frankly, we also need to know, what are you going to ask for when you talk to Thor? I mean, it's one thing to sit down and just give an offering, kind of like what I did, and I just said, you know, I wanted to thank him for protection of my home and of course, you know, of myself, you know, when I travel. And that's something that I find in my personal practice that I do fairly often with Thor, is before I do go on a long travel or a road trip, I do tend to give an offering to protect my home. And I have had actually this Thor figurine for ever since I really moved on my own. And I've always seen it as the protector of my home. And something I actually saw a lot in the God's Own County book is talking about him being the ward or the shield for the, you know, the common people of Midgard. And I, you know, that's really stuck with me. So I think really focusing on that can be really helpful. But something I definitely want to show you is the God of the Hearth aspect. Since I do finally have a fireplace, I want to go get one started so we can talk more about that concept of the God of the Hearth. I've always felt a strong connection with Thor when I train. One day I was getting ready to go into an MMA practice and gave an offering to Thor before I went in. On that particular day we were doing a lot of ground and pound drilling. My partner was laying down a striking pad and I was doing a 3-minute round punches and elbows. As the round went on, I felt the strikes getting harder and harder. The sound of my hands hitting the pad started to sound like thunder with every hit. It started to feel as though I was in a sort of trance. I was able to hold back just enough to not put my partner in any danger. It almost felt as though Thor was helping me throw the punches and elbows, like I was just a vessel for him. It was just such an overwhelming feeling of strength and power. I felt an immense happiness and self-satisfaction come over me. When the round was over, people were coming up to me saying that they were impressed with the blows I was landing. I'm trying to put this experience into words, but it was truly an out-of-this-world experience that you would have to have for yourself to truly appreciate it. I hope to have many more experiences with Thor, as he was the first god I felt a connection with, and I've had by far the strongest connection with him. The only fight I've had so far was unfortunately before I started the path in Norse Paganism, but my hope is that I will fight again soon. I will feel him with me whenever I fight from now on. Moving forward deeper into the idea of him not being just the thunder god, I feel like it is so easy to just focus on that. But if you are lucky enough to have a fireplace or even a fire pit outside your home, I think this could be a really great way to connect with Thor as well. Something I've been hard on for a while now is obviously this channel is called the Wisdom of Odin, but I've also been very hard on Odin in the sense that I don't think many people should necessarily go with Odin as their primary deity. While yes, Odin can teach you a lot, he also does tend to like drag you in the dirt for miles on end, leave you butt naked in the middle of the desert and say good luck finding your way back and then drive away. Obviously a metaphor, but that's how it kind of feels sometimes to follow Odin, is that he has very hard lessons and sometimes they're not as obvious as you would like them to be. And then also you can just be very aloof. You can disappear for months or even years at a time. So I believe that more people that get into this faith for the first time should seek out Thor. He is the god of the people in the past as well as now. This is why I made my Marvel deconstruction video, so that way we can kind of remove the Marvel Thor from the equation, because I believe that's one of the reasons so many people don't actually follow Thor as a primary deity in this faith. You see a lot of people go for Odin, especially when they get into it right away. Now, again, if Odin is who you want to focus on, that's great, but I just fear that more people will get burned out following Odin or more discouraged because he isn't always there. Whereas Thor, have a fireplace, run out into a thunderstorm, have a drink with him, speak with him, he's going to be there. So I also wanted to take this time to talk about alternative offerings to drinks, because obviously I give drinks a lot, because usually when you have an altar that you just have like a bowl or a cup on, it's a lot easier just to give drinks. Now with Thor, something that you can give that I've given in the past is goat and or lamb, just because he does eat his own goats. But when it comes to meat, it becomes a lot harder to just give that in your own home. Having something like an outdoor fire pit is really one of the only easy ways to give meat to Thor. Even having a fireplace in my home, if I just threw a rack of lamb in there, it's still going to be in there if it burns up, and I'm going to have to clean it up later. So if you're going to give something like meat, just be prepared for, how you're going to dispose of it. I mean, you can leave it in the woods for animals to get, but at the same time, you have to think about, like, if I did that, my neighbors might, not like me very much. It might start to smell. I mean, I have left like a steak outside of my old apartment like years ago and learned very quickly that's a bad idea. But goat and or lamb can be a great option to give to Thor to connect with him. But also something I wanted to show today, this is something I find with many deities is easy to give, is a letter and or note or drawing that you can burn up in a fire. And this is of course something that I can do in my own home as well. And I think this is a really good way if you don't feel comfortable using your voice or just sitting in front of an altar and meditating. I find that writing a note can be also therapeutic to what you actually need from that deity. So, you're actually thinking, what would I want from Thor? It gives you a chance to think about it, to get a little bit more poetic with it, and then have a note that you can then burn to the gods. So I've been doing this for a long time, and I just find it to be very effective, but also, not only is it spiritual, but also that therapeutic aspect. So, the Thor. What I learned from the research video is that Thor is a very complicated character. He is not one-dimensional. He is not all just slaying giants and beating things up with Mjolnir. He is also a wise man. He is also a loving man, a caring person, and someone that many of us should look up to, a man of honor. So I do think that he needs more recognition in his community. But also I find it to be a much more calming presence. While Odin can be a lot of things, but calming isn't one in his top 10 list. I've had calm moments with Odin, but after usually excessive moments of torment and questioning. But just sitting here next to this fire, you know, burning a note to Thor after giving a beer to him, it's just very calming. And I feel just good. It's a very good experience to give to Thor. And I know many of us in this modern age want that complication, want that deeper layer. But when it comes to a faith that you want to follow for years to come, for the rest of your life, giving to someone like Thor on a regular basis is going to help you maintain that connection on a more personal level, on a more everyday level. Here is my Thor story. As a child, I loved thunderstorms. I would sit and stare at the sky to wait for the lightning to crack. I always hoped for the power to go out so I could just sit and listen to the storm. My cousins would get scared, so my mom would tell them the story that we've been told to every child. The thunder is God bowling. It's the sound of him getting a strike. I thought this was silly, especially since I did not live in a religious household. My birthday is in the summer. There would always be storms around my birthday. I would dance in the rain and watch the sky light up and roar. I always felt some sort of connection. I had no fear. I felt safe. It was as if it was a birthday present for me. Then as I got older and got into Norse mythology, I smiled because it wasn't God bowling. It was Thor, one of my gods. And I think of all the tales, way cooler and meaningful than some bowling story. As a bit of a bonus, many people ask me what do I do with offerings I leave on my altar. Do I just let them eventually evaporate? No, of course not. So I usually give it a couple of days before I actually take them off the offering and cleaning it. I think, maintaining an altar space, cleaning it, keeping it dusted, keeping the offerings, fresh on it is part of owning an altar space. So I usually give it a couple of days before I actually take it. If I can, I do try to take the offering outside and leaving it as my outdoor altar is a 2-4 from my house. I try to move it out there, or at very least try to pour it around some rocks. I have taken offerings before and just dumped them down the sink. That just doesn't feel right to me, but I'm sure there's nothing too wrong about it. But you gotta find what works for you. But obviously I don't just let them get all sour and weird. I've done that before. I'm not perfect. I've definitely had some offerings stay on an offering table way too long, but you'll find what works for you. Thank you for joining me in celebrating Thor this week with the 3 videos I've released, and thank you if you watched all 3, or if you are just now tuning in for this episode, be sure to go back and check the other 2. I do want to continue the series of looking into gods and goddesses for a whole week, possibly doing 2, 3, maybe even 4 episodes. With Thor, it felt very appropriate to do 3. I believe the next God week is going to be dealing with Freya, so make sure you're subscribed and notified when that happens. Otherwise, thank you so much once again for joining me for Thor's week. I hope you've enjoyed it, and until the hall, Skål. If you would like to get more involved with the Wisdom of Odin and support what I do here, please consider donating to Patreon. I have 3 tiers available, one of which gaining you access to our Discord community, a judgment-free environment that you can ask questions about Norse paganism and Norse mythology. And then I also have another tier that gains you access to live streams, and the final tier gains you access to early access videos, as well as gets your name in the credits. No matter how you support the Wisdom of Odin, whether it's through Patreon or just by watching these videos, thank you so very much, and until the hall, Skål.